Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 44 of the Cross Media Show. Today's topic is Arcane, a League of Legends story. But before we get into our discussion, we got a little housekeeping. If you're watching this on YouTube, consider dropping a like, sub, and don't forget to ring the bell for notifications on all our shows like the Penultimate Game Show, the Cross Media Show, and my show, Anime Nation. If you're watching this on Twitch, you have Amazon Prime, which means you have Prime Gaming, which means you have one free sub for Twitch. We'd love if you gave it to us, but if not, that's quite alright. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ryan, the host of Anime Nation, and I got some great guests today to talk about Arcane. First up, we got the JRPG madman, my boy, John. How you doing today, John?
Hey, I'm doing very well.
Next up, we got the comic book connoisseur, Anthony. How you doing, Anthony? Long time no see.
Hey, I'm doing good. It's weird to be involved with a show that has so much history attached to it that I'm just not aware of it all. And so I am the newbie coming in here like, yo, it's a cool show.
And lastly, we have the Halo aficionado from Point in Progress, Mario Rivera. How you doing, Mario?
Hey, thank you so much for enjoying me. I am shocked that I'm here too, as someone who's made fun of a LOL all his life. I'm shocked to be here.
Well, that's a great dive into our first topic of this show, which is history of League of Legends. Mario, what's your history of League of Legends? I take it not much.
No, I honestly I have zero real experience with League of Legends. I mean, I played once when a friend of mine, Logan Moore, and our troop there sort of convinced me to download it, and I played. I had no idea what I was doing. Don't know what legend I was playing as, and I was like, "This is like a bad Diablo. I don't want to play it." I've also I've also had associations with the game with someone I didn't like in college, and so I also was just like, I don't want to play that game that guy likes. So yeah, it is a surprise to be a series that's been going on for this long to finally have an insight into it that I find finally really compelling and interesting. So definitely, yeah, it's been a fun journey so far.
All right. Anthony, what about you? Do you have any history of League of Legends?
I've watched some of it back when esports were starting to get big. I would like pop in and just check out various tournament stuff just to see what it was about. So I didn't know really anything in terms of the show. What made it even better for me was my little brother, who has zero context for video games or anything like that, watched it with me, and he was just as enthralled. And so I'm very excited for not only the show but the writing team and everyone involved in the company that they could do more than just this show.
All right, all right. And John, lastly, you have any history of League of Legends?
So from 2011 to 2015, if I wanted to hang out with my friends, it was entirely through League of Legends. They literally, like, we were in college at the time and living in a dorm, and every time they weren't doing classes or homework, they were playing League of Legends. So I actually quit. I was looking it up just a year or two after Vi and Jinx came out. So they are like the two new champs that I think of as like, oh yeah, those are newer champs in League, and now they've been out for like almost 7 years. So I am actually relatively familiar with those two specifically.
Mhm.
A lot of the other characters I never bothered looking into because they didn't appeal to me as much. But it is interesting seeing how the lore has sort of evolved since the last time I was in the League of Legends.
All right. And then for me to give a quick overview is I played League of Legends from 1 year after it came out to 2018. So like a good 8, 9 years of playing League of Legends. I didn't play it a lot, but I was always come back to it. It was a game that was in the rotation. But yeah, no, that game is a hellscape. If I have one thing to say is if you loved Arcane, before we get into more spoilers and everything, do not go play League of Legends. It's nothing like it. Try the other things that are out right now. Runeterra is great.
They made such a great decision of releasing multiple things this month, so that way,
Yeah.
but like, hey, you could try that, or you can
And,
try these other things.
Temple of the Ruined King, or I forget what it's called.
Yeah, the Rune
the
King.
turn base is real good. I've
Yeah.
done that and the card game. They're fantastic.
Yeah, and Hex Tech Mayhem as well, which is a
I
platformer.
think there's the mobile version Wild Rift. It takes a lot of. It might still be toxic, but a lot of the really annoying, minuscule number crunching that League makes you do is like much more reduced because first of all, it's designed to have like 10-minute matches, and League of Legends matches can go over an hour sometimes. So
Brutal.
if you want to play real League, but like not sit there for 45 minutes to lose a match, you could always try Wild Rift. It's all right.
All right, and with that, we're going to move on to our next topic, which is first impressions. Mario, what was your first impressions while watching this?
I saw that it was a League of Legends thing, and immediately I'm like, no, I don't want to deal with this. However, I have someone in my life. You might know her as Fiona. She makes fun of me when I call her by her first full name, so Fee, from Point in Progress. Not only did she get into it, she got really into it, and then started watching all of the like anime pop videos and stuff like that, and just would not stop talking about it for a couple days. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it. And then I saw that she was watching with Harv, so I'm like, okay, I'll catch up. And so finally, I put it on, and I was eating a bowl of spaghetti, and I passed out. And I was like, I told Fee that, and she got real mad at me. But at the same, but I had to tell her, hey, it wasn't the show, it was the spaghetti. I passed out. I'm getting older. So past the spaghetti part, when I got through the first episode, I was like, oh, okay, wait a minute. There's something going on here that's not only past League of Legends itself, but the art form itself in which it's presenting itself. And I found that compelling, especially when it comes to the way that every shot of this show is like, to me, I called it was magic cards come to life. Every frame is a magic card where it just has that painfully beautiful look.
Perfect. That's a perfect description.
You pause the show at any point and it's a perfect shot. Like, it's gorgeous. Mm-hmm. And this show, when it starts unfurling and you start going into the deeper of the world, my first impression obviously was like, I'm finding this finally accessible in a way that I was not expecting. And that allowed me to get engaged with the characters as well as with the world and understand things in a lot of ways that I think that from a game that's been out for 11 years, you're expecting that you're going to be totally withheld with so much possible information. I think what they did was so smartly was focus in on this 2 areas and talk about that conflict and tell that story. And it's a very simple story of, these 2 sisters of, doing through some crazy stuff through their lives while also dealing with this grander story. So yeah, I think early on I was hesitant, obviously, but once you start, you kind of can't stop. And I didn't do the 3 episode of like watch the 3, wait for the next one, watch the 3, wait for the next one. I ended up watching it all the way through, and I'm better for it because that would have sucked. I got to the end of that 3rd episode, I'm like, what is going to happen next?
I can't imagine that. Yeah, because I didn't watch it the 3 either. So I've been moving and everything, just gone to a new apartment. Didn't have Wi-Fi, so I kept hearing about this show and how amazing it was. So the minute I got Wi-Fi that night, I sat down. I was like, let's see what this is all about. And I'm like, oh, I've watched all of this in the span of a night. Okay, no, this is real good. What about you, Anthony? What was your first impressions of watching this?
Well, for me, I was one of the ones that did go from week to week with my younger brother. So every weekend, it'd get like, come on, it's time. We're going to watch a show.
Ooh, there's always great moments when you get that. There's when you have that scheduled show watch during the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the first thing that stuck out for me was the art style and just the presentation of it. It was so striking and so memorable. And the art style, the way they compose shots as you go through the show. And it's just a really great looking show, and that's one of the most memorable things from my perspective, because I've come off of like what is it, He-Man on Netflix, and like that's okay, whatever, that show. But just to compare and contrast in terms of what you're presenting an audience as a service, like the bar is so different. So there was that, and then when it was first coming out, I wasn't sure, like that first week when it was going to come out, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to watch this. But then one of the media entertainment reviewers came out and did an early review. She had like the preview, and she was so excited for this show. She knew nothing of video games. She was just approaching this as a TV show that was coming out, that is excellent, evidently at the time. I was like, okay, I'll check it out. The acting was great. The plot, as you said prior, it's small, but there's so much character in there that it hooks into you, and it's such a good show.
And John, what were your first impressions?
So, I was surprised, or I guess not surprised, but it's interesting that they're trying to do a difficult thing where they're trying to, even though this is based on a video game that's 3D, the art style is definitely based on the 2D concept art that is on each champion's menu screen when you select them and look at their like background information. And that is difficult to do, to take a 2D art style and masterfully put it into 3D. I think of often the some of the Gundam anime or the infamous Berserk anime that just completely ruined the visual style of that manga when it was put in 3D. But this perfectly nails this like very specific art style of looking kind of comic booky, kind of painterly, to the point where like whenever there's like a broad area, like a wall or like a texture you can get fancy on, they have fake brush strokes going on like walls and like bricks and stuff.
Yeah, it's
It's
amazing.
that really impressed me, and then as well seeing these words that my brain vaguely remembers from when I used to play League, like Piltover and Zon and Noxus, and finally getting a concrete idea of what those words mean, rather than just being like, this guy is from the place where they make poisonous things. This guy's from the God of War area. I finally like now I know what Piltover means, other than this is where we put all of our moderny heroes. Or Zon is more than just. I thought of it as sewer place because every time there was a character from Zon, his background was like in a sewer. So now I get the tone of those areas, and that impressed me, as well as the storytelling of it's difficult to do a prequel and make it feel enticing. I guess for other people this is just the story, but for me I'm like, okay, so at some point Jinx is gonna have pigtails and a minigun. At some point Vi is gonna have robot arms. How do we get to that? And they do a good job of making the story feel interesting when you know that's the end goal at some point.
I also agree with that, and I'm going to take over for the. I'm going to start off for the next one of when did you realize this was something special? And for me, that was the end of episode 3, when that first arc is over with of them as kids and the way they handled everything with them as kids. This is some of the best animated kids I've seen in a very long time, of where they are well done, fleshed out, all amazing characters. Each of them felt great. Especially Echo. I want to give a shout out to Echo. I thought he's one of my favorite characters throughout this. But to me, after I sat and watched those 3 and the ending, everything, and the breakaway of the 2 sisters and how everything fell apart, it felt. One, it was beautiful. I knew this while looking from the trailer from the get-go, this was going to be pretty. But you need to be more than just pretty to be in a special show like this. And for me, it was that ending. I was like, this is like near Avatar: The Last Airbender's job of telling a story. And that's a very high bar for animated TV to do. And this did it very well. Anthony, what about for you? What was the moment where you're like, oh, this is next level. This is special?
For me, it was probably once we got into the, I guess the second arc is what we'll call it, if you go by the 3-episode chunks.
Yeah.
When we started that, because the setup was so great, okay, but can they keep it? Can they keep it going? Because some shows could start great and then they could fumble, and it kept it, and it was so good. And as someone who had no context for anything that was happening outside of like what is it? They do those music videos. that
Oh,
they
yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Those are my only context for League of Legends and anything that's happening. And so like when they played the little Jinx song, there was like, oh, I know that song. I watched that video. That's pretty cool.
I remember that music video got a lot of views on YouTube back in the day.
That too. When I looked back, I was, oh, that was so long ago.
Yeah, Fiona actually showed me videos afterwards. I was like, wait, I heard that in the show. I was like, yeah, that was in the show. I was like, oh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
To me, the show kind of implies that Jinx made her own theme song, which is funny because
Yeah.
it is about Jinx. Like it's from her perspective now. So
I feel like every person has a secret band in this show. Just this sort of like Imagine Dragon.
there are several in-universe League of Legends bands where the champions are bands. Like there's a heavy metal band made up of characters that are not supposed to be heavy metal performers, but it's all right. It's cool.
Are we doing spoilers by the way? Just before
oh yeah, we're going full spoilers.
The one thing I wanted to say is I can't believe that Imagine Dragons is actually in the universe. 'Cause that band is exactly modeled after them too.
I
Yeah.
can't believe I'm listening to an Imagine Dragons song a couple times a day now in the good
don't hate
year
it.
of 2021.
I don't hate it.
That was the biggest thing that shocked me.
When I saw the Game Awards listing of like Imagine Dragons gonna be, I was like, all right, cool. I'm excited this
Yeah,
time.
I'm like, oh, I can't wait for that Arcane moment in there.
They're gonna play
Two.
it.
They're gonna have
Absolutely.
two.
Yeah.
They're gonna have Sting as well.
I forgot Sting will be there.
I was like, yes, play that song. I want to get sad. It's like,
John, for you, what was the moment where you were like, oh, this is special? This is something special.
So for me, the easy part was that I've always liked Vi and Jinx's characters from League. They're just cool characters. One is a pink-haired police officer, which I'm a little on. The other is a blue-haired Joker moment chick that has a minigun and a rocket launcher named Fishbones. But for me, it was that I got invested in Jace and Caitlyn, who were always characters that I always was like, oh yeah, normies play them because they don't want to play the anime or the monster characters in this game. They'll pick the hot guy with the magic hammer and the hot chick with the top hat. But it was also at some point I stopped making fun of Heimerdinger's name, and I've never done that. The entire time I was playing League, every time there was a Heimerdinger, I'd be like, "Oh, it's a Heimerdinger," and I'd make fun of him. I'd like type mean messages in the chat. But then I got invested in him.
A healthy game.
Not I would just like be like Heimerdinger and like try to make a fake Swedish accent in the chat. But I was actually invested in him as like the Yoda of this universe. That's like this ancient person that sort of lived for hundreds of years and seen cycles of war and trying to prevent that and sort of standing in the way of progress. I got invested in him and the politics of the Council of Piltover.
he was the one character I wanted to punch in the face because I was like, stop it. Let them do magic. And of course, I understand why, but still. I was like always standing in the way, and I'm like, stop it.
Yeah.
They're gonna do cool and bad things. Let's let them do cool and bad things. But now I understand, like I said, he's a character that you can understand, and I love his progression at the end of the season, which I was very happy about.
He's the Elrond of this universe. He
Yes.
told him to throw the ring in the fire, and he didn't. And now he's like, guys, I've seen this.
I know what's coming up, and it's not pretty.
He was one of the characters I was surprised. I wasn't surprised to see him. I knew he was from Piltover, but I was surprised how well they handled. Because again, he's always been this weird little techie character, so it was weird for him to be such an important role. But they played it off so well of this calm genius who's seen everything and will see more. He is near undying. He will live for hundreds upon hundreds of years, and he knows that. So that's why he doesn't understand the quarrels of a mortal man and what death is, because he does not have that fear in his life. I thought that was an amazing. His interactions between Jace and what's Jace's partner's name?
Victor, who is also a champion.
Yeah. Their interactions, their three interactions were amazing. I was always impressed by them.
Heimerdinger was also interesting because in League, his lore is like the founder of Piltover, really important dude. But the way he's portrayed as a gameplay character is he's a joke character. He's like a mad scientist, like jokey, Dr. Brown type character. So it's interesting to see him be like lore Heimerdinger instead of gameplay Heimerdinger.
It was, and there's one part for me where with him, it's what's going to move this into favorite characters right now, because why not? We're talking characters. I feel like that's a good time to do it. With Heimerdinger, there's one part for me that was odd. It's when he went down to the below, when he went to the sewers, when he went to Zon. And I get why they had him do it. I wish they flushed it out a bit more, though. It felt very odd that he was down there, and it felt like it was only down there so he'd meet Echo at the end of it when he was heading back up.
Yeah.
That was one of the few minute problems I had with that entire show, though. For that, though, Anthony, what was your favorite character throughout this, or favorite characters?
I really liked Victor, however you say it,
Mhm.
his kind of arc throughout it, and like the little I don't know coworker that he had that passed away with the
Guy,
sand
Yes.
or whatever,
guy,
all that
yeah.
that like she was such a small part, but that was such an important and impactful moment, and that was really powerful for me. And I really liked the contrast they created in the council and the people below when they
Mhm.
had like normally sometimes it shows all the politics talking like yeah whatever I want to get back. This was like really good, well written. You got both perspectives and you could see what they were trying to do, and I really liked how they presented the inventor at the front, this dude who was just a bro trying to help, and his spiral
Yeah.
for all of that. But also, we don't get a lot of characters that deal with mental illness in televised fiction all that often. When we do, it's
No.
like a Joker or someone that we have no real context for. They're just kind of bad, and so it was nice to see. Even though she goes not a great path, but you could at least relate, empathize, and kind of understand her journey and what happened to her, and the visual way they presented it also was excellent.
I definitely agree with that. John, what about for you? What are some favorite characters?
So I have my league bias. So like I was mostly into the show for Jinx. She was my one of my favorite characters when she came out. I just really like the concept of like a punk jokey girl making jokes. So this show asks you to take Jinx seriously. And it's not that it was difficult for me. It was just painful to watch the jokey, like she's a Joker parody in League of Legends. And they actually delve into that trauma and like what would make her to do that, and like the fact that she deals with weapons and explosives is like the unfortunate situation of being raised in a violent area like Zon, like the Undercity of Piltover, and how, and it also contextualizes it in a better way because I have an uncle who suffers from schizophrenia, and I get really annoyed the way schizophrenia is portrayed as like the I see things that make me go crazy mental illness, and this does a good job of like showing that it's not so much that her trauma makes her violent as that violence has always been tied with her trauma. And so like everyone that she grows up around has to do violence in general, so that's not the part that makes her crazy. The part that makes her crazy, she is crazy because of being exposed to violence at such a young age and trying to deal with that. I If I were to pick someone who isn't Jinx to be my favorite character, I really liked Silco. Not like liked him as a character, but like the way he is written is so complex because he is a villainous character who's doing unscrupulous things, but you can tell that his parental love for Jinx is genuine. He sees a lot of himself in Jinx, and he is trying to be the father that he never had to Jinx. And it's interesting because even after she kills him, he like bears no ill will
He
towards her.
completely understood.
Yeah, and for a while I thought it was like a power thing of being like I'm going to take Vander's child and make her my child, and he's like, and it's not that, it's we were both betrayed by Vander, or Vander's daughter in the case of Jinx and Vi, and we will grow stronger together and overcome that, and that is hard to do, and I think they did it really well with Silco.
I was so worried they were gonna go a creepy route with Silco, and I was like, "Oh, at
Yeah,
any moment this could go bad."
Yeah.
Especially
yeah.
the baptism scene. I'm like, "Oh, this could go bad at any moment." I was like, "They never did it. Good on them."
I
This is
think
just
part
a
of it is that Jinx's design is too close to how she looks at as a grown woman, and I think she's supposed to be like a younger teenager. So if you think of her as like 13 or 14, that weird age where you're still close to your dad, but like those boundaries aren't all the way there yet, where like certain affection is like kind of weird to be doing with your father. I think it makes a little more sense. I think if they had made her look a little younger, maybe that those parts wouldn't have felt so creepy.
I definitely agree with that, but I think it was a perfect line they skated of
Mm-hmm.
it was always uncomfortable, but they did have this weird parental thing going on, which was an
Mm-hmm.
interesting and hard story to tell, and it was a dark story, even up until the end. For me, two characters that really stood out for me was a character a character I never cared about, never. Um, I was like, oh, all right, the punchy person who does punchies, awesome. And I was like, okay, no, you've had to carry the weight of the whole team on your shoulders for your entire life. You always been that. And then I like the different versions of her you get to see. Like the lone street kid trying to hold everything together, to then getting to be a bit more happy, a bit more fun when she's with Caitlyn, all that, and those are great moments. And then when she completely goes totally ape shit when she gets to go with Jace down into the sewers and fully unleash violence that she's been penting up and holding on to. So it's great character development. Another character I loved was Jace. He he never felt totally like a bad guy, and he never felt totally like a good guy. And I thought that was an amazing thing to do, because I thought when I first think of Jace, I think of him as the golden boy, the what is it? The inventor of tomorrow. I was his
Mm-hmm.
line, right? And they made him kind of into a scumbag, but like you could see how he was manipulated into being a scumbag. With especially one of my favorite scenes, it's a quiet scene, because of course the action in this is amazing, but one of the quiet scenes was when they were at the opera house and he was learning how politics worked in this world. He's like, I can't allow this. He's like, well, actually, you gotta butter everybody up if you want them all to play ball. And him slowly coming to terms with that, I thought was a really interesting turn for the character. So for me, that's two of my favorite characters. Mario, what about you? What's some characters that stuck with you?
I think the characters that stuck with me the most were actually characters that we don't spend a whole lot of time with, but they've definitely left impressions. And I'm very curious if we're gonna get some of these characters again. So the first one I'm gonna talk about is obviously I think Echo, starting from being Little Man, or at least being described as Little Man early on, which is really
Yeah,
cute. Being sort of this apprentice to this shop owner, but then seeing his evolution as sort of a leader of this underground group of these. I'm just going to call them fireflies. I'm not sure what they're really called, but
that was their name with the
is that what
Fireflies.
their name? 'Cause
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
would say I was going with like the Last of Us reference,
Uh,
but very much so. See his evolution as a character, and to see which I thought was going to be not a good fight, which was him and Jinx, because I was first when I first saw the fight. And it was still images and music playing. I was like, I want to actually see you guys fight. But I'm so happy that it was a twist on his character, which of course is with this watch thing, which is sort of like reversing time. And then there is an actual fight.
Yeah.
It's very fast, but it's still really cool and stylistic in a way that I found fascinating
Mhm.
and awesome. So I really love him. I'm glad that he's still around, obviously, and to do things with Heimerdinger and to, hopefully see how that progresses. But the other character that I think that deserves a lot of love, and even though he's gone so quickly, is Vander. I think Vander is actually a pretty excellent father figure who tries to maintain everything, but when it comes to his children, he does have a soft spot, and they can be manipulated or attacked too. So yeah, I mean he's willing to sacrifice himself entirely for something, and I thought that was very beautiful and wonderful. And you see him go ape shit, especially at the end when he tries to do
Yeah.
whatever he can to keep him alive. I will love him, and I have a feeling we're going to see him again because I learned a lot of lore stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah. I've
secret
been
stuff,
looking into it.
Werlick.
and there is a tease in the show that has something very similar, and I'm very curious if that's going to be the case. The other, and I'll double up on Jinx. I think Jinx's character evolution of being Powder into Jinx was really phenomenal and fantastic. And I think the show, what really made me very like, wow, they're going there, was she makes a mistake, that cost lives, multiple
Yeah.
lives. And if you don't really see often that happen, you don't see children doing that.
You don't see a children get hit in the chest with a rail spike. That
No,
was
Yeah.
brutal.
multiple children die in the show.
Yeah.
There were other parts of the show that were a little more Games of Thronesy than I was expecting.
Yeah,
Normally, when Netflix says like this is an anime thing, they don't feel this T for teen sort of going for an aspect that's actually like adult and mature in both the writing as well as some of the
yeah.
content matter.
No, for sure. And I think that was such a case that held through the rest of the show when you do see other kids dying or the scene that like I was like, no fucking way they're doing this because I don't know any lore
Yeah,
from League of Legends. So the scene where
Lord of
they're
the
at the
Rings.
dinner table, Lord of the Rings, when they're when they're at the dinner table and fucking Jinx puts that thing on the table and you're like, no, she
Yeah,
did not. She
yeah,
did not do that. And then she's like, "What do you think? I'm a monster?" And I'm like, "Yes." So
yeah,
it
yeah.
played with my
I was
expectations.
100%. I'm like, oh fuck, she fucking did it.
I
Oh
was like,
god.
"Holy shit! How are they going to depict?" I mean, just because the show went there and made you believe that
Mm-hmm.
it's they
Mm-hmm.
knew what they were doing, and it was just so well
It was
crafted.
that's how invested and
Yeah.
involved in this world that this show had you in,
Yeah,
is that you were ready to believe that fully. You're
yeah.
like, oh, this fucking happened. And
Could
even
she
I,
do it? Yeah.
who knows the lore, is like, maybe I don't know it as well as I did. Good God, what is
Oh,
happening?
No, for
Um,
sure. Shout out to
and then
Caitlyn too. Just want to say that.
oh, Caitlyn was a great character.
Yeah, that
I
shower
something
could have,
scene was
I
very
found
realistic.
interesting is I
yeah, John.
expected Caitlyn and Jace's roles to be reversed. Like I expect Jace to be the guy who's like, I'm trying to do what's right, and I am a naive idealist that doesn't realize that I'm kind of on the wrong path. And
Yeah,
he is sort of like that, but he does get like we have to like hit harder and harder. While Caitlyn, who in as a character in the game, she's like a straight up cop. Like that's what they present her as, a sniper cop.
Sheriff of Piltover, isn't it? Isn't that what
Yes,
she's called?
that's
Yeah.
what she's called. So I was expecting her to be more like I want to prove myself by doing some damage, and instead she's like very empathetic towards the plight of the Undercity folk, and she's like, I did not know that this is going on. I did not realize that this is the price that I pay for my privilege, and she wants to challenge that. And I appreciate. I think it's interesting to take her in that direction and take Jace in that direction. It makes them more interesting as characters compared to the how they're portrayed in the games.
It definitely does, and I have to agree with that. For me with Caitlyn, and just I want to bring up the cop that she was shooting against, the first officer who was down there who got killed by Silco,
yeah,
and then when Silco brought in, were two characters that had minor roles but were done amazingly. That they both understood that they had to play ball with gangsters and criminals to have peace be between the Undercity and Piltover,
yeah,
but it did in two completely different ways. Um, the first one had true respect for oh god, what's his name? Why can't I think of it now? Vander. Um, maybe not of everything Vander's ever done in his life, but she had respect for Vander and understood why he was so well respected and loved by the community and was the bearer of everything down there happening. And then when you get to oh god, what was his name? It was Marcus, right? The other cop
Mm-hmm.
who took over, and his way of being like, I just work for Silco. It's what I do. It's how I live a good life. Everything like that. And to the moments when Silco goes to his home, Silco goes up top and is talking to his kid, and he's and you're just like, what the hell is Silco gonna do here? Because I could have seen Silco killing his family. That feels like something Silco would have done. And all that. There were two great character moments for characters that really were only affecting the plot for 20 minutes of screen time, probably altogether. And now we're going to keep moving downwards, which will be two favorite moments. Anthony, what are some of your favorite moments from this?
I really liked the intro bit with the kids, getting them to explore the world, and this working as an introduction for new people like me to kind of see the contrast of the two worlds, what could be and what they currently have to deal with, and all that sort of stuff. And so that was really good as a
It
way
was
to
a,
both
it was it's a
introduce.
real good use of the haves and the have-nots.
Yep. And then the towards the later half of the show, when Jinx started to break and we would see what she's experiencing from that perspective,
Mm-hmm.
the way it's portrayed, the artistry, and the getting to be in that moment with her, uh, those were really powerful.
I also agree with that. I agree with that. John, what about you? What's some of your favorite moments from this?
Um, so this is weird because it doesn't contribute a whole lot to the plot, but when Mel's mother and Bessa Medarda shows up, just every scene she's in, she just wields immense power without doing anything. For one aspect, speaking of the show getting kind of like more mature, is when she steps off like her skyboat. She's from Noxus, which is the war country in League of Legends. They're like Spartans. They're like, we love war, we love battling. That is how we do politics. We just fight whoever, and whoever's the strongest wins and keeps going. First of all, I was not expecting like a major character from that world to be African, to be black skinned. There's not a lot of black characters in League of Legends. She's not a character in League of Legends. Most of the time, they tend to be like troll looking people, um, uh, people from Noxus in that world. So that was cool. But then she's like, this guy, I got a Piltover boy. He's my buddy. I'm gonna be doing
Yeah.
stuff with him. And then the
Yeah.
next thing you see with her is her at a bathhouse, completely naked, being washed by that white guy, also completely naked, the skinny white boy, talking to Jace about political matters. And then at some point, she just stands up butt naked, and Jace is uncomfortable, and she does not give a fuck.
No.
And
Especially
I hope-
because he's dating her daughter in some
Yeah.
aspects.
yes, exactly. Yeah, he's dating her daughter, and she just stands up before this guy, completely naked. There's something like there's just raw sensual power in there. I hope she's in the next season because I want to see more from her. But also the Noxus champs are really interesting. I hope we do see some people from Noxus next time from the game. But every scene she's in, she's just like, she doesn't do anything threatening, but like just her existence is a threat. And I think that's interesting work on the writers and character animators. In
I
that show.
thought the conversation between her and her daughter was amazing when she was explaining like why we're here for this, why like the actual motives and everything she had going on. Because Piltover was they were having their own problems, and
Mm-hmm.
she's pretty much there to just scavenge the bones of whatever happens to the fallout of this uprising / war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting character dynamic. Mario, for you, what were some of your favorite moments throughout this?
I think early on in the show, when the way that it grabbed me, obviously, was it was very similar to a lot of the media that I love, which of course is a group of kids doing funny things and going on crazy adventures, and it's Goonies, it's Monster Squad, it's all these things. And
Yeah.
so definitely whenever I had a chance to hang out with those kids was a lot of fun. Specifically, obviously the end when they are trying to save Vander. I enjoy that whole section because I had no idea. I obviously assumed that they would survive and we'll go on our merry way to the rest of the show. And obviously,
Important characters to the plot and be there for every moment.
My brother and I were arguing about which league champions that they were, and these were their real names, and their champion names are like nicknames like Jinx.
Of course.
And then they die, and we're like, oh, so they're nobody.
So
I could have sworn he was like gonna be Junkrat or Twitch or someone, but then a different rat turns into Twitch. So
no, for sure. So that's why it's funny, yeah, because I
Mhm.
could have swore I saw images of one of the characters wearing those goggles, and I was like, okay, maybe he's later. No, it's Vi wears those goggles sometimes.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, got it. I will say, I think obviously the fight scenes are some of the most dynamic things that I've ever seen. Like the fight scene with the kids early on is such a wonderful depiction of these kids putting over each other. Like the slow motion fighting, like the fists going, and like it looked incredible. So I enjoy all those moments. The moment that probably got me the most was definitely when Jinx fires the flare.
I was about to bring that up if you
And
didn't.
Woodkid plays, and the music also is a phenomenal mixture.
Yeah.
All this, like, I listened to the album last night front to back, and I was like, wow, the way that the world just somehow becomes, it's modern fiction where it like exists in our timeline in terms of like people talk like we do, they swear like we do, they listen to music. I mean, it's a very specific type of rock music, but it's fine. You know, it's like they
And
exist in
In
a
a world where only
Imagine
Imagine Dragons is the band.
or Imagine Dragons is the fucking band, and it's a world where they take their lore seriously, and the way that they introduce it and just make it engaging and fun. Like the way that they allowed me into this world and telling the story is just so magical. And obviously there's other stuff and death demons and monsters, but they show almost no monsters. I mean, they show like the goblin creature people, and that's really about it. And then there's the one monster you see under with Victor with the the scientist, the scientist dude. And I was like, okay, I had no idea monsters exist, but I assume they did because you got to kill ads. So
they do have a handful of those like bat-eared people. I don't know if there's anyone in League of Legends that like was released after I got into it, because I couldn't think of any champions that looked like that. But those were interesting.
Yeah, and he doesn't have a lot of lines. He doesn't have a lot of lines, but I'm like, you're interesting. I'm curious about you. But they didn't need to. They didn't need to explain really anything. It just sort of like, this is the world. This exists. You get all the information that you need. This is the conflict. And here you go. And then we'll introduce things slowly, like gods and stuff later. And I'm like, that's fine.
It was an amazing world to be just thrown into and just be like, okay, so this is happening here. This is happening here. And just slowly get to pick around and see how it's telling you all these things. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
For me, the two moments that stood out the most, definitely one is Jinx lighting the flare. It is beautiful. The music hitting just right. Everything hits in that moment just right. It is all perfectly done to a masterclass. Into the what's up danger moment from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I put it on that same level. And there's very few things I'd put on that level. And for me, the second moment, it's a lot quieter of a moment. It's when Victor and Jace talk right before Victor tried to kill himself. Right before he thought about just falling off the edge. And their conversation up there. It's such a quiet, intimate, calm moment before what we knew was going to be a storm, because it is the final episode. And we know all this crazy stuff is happening throughout the entirety of this world. But these two at least get to spend one quiet moment together and having just a conversation and just trying to settle things out, because they've had their problems. They've gone two different directions completely. One learns he's dying, and the other is now becoming a true champion and true, basically, king of this land. He is pretty much runs the council with an iron fist. He is completely unchecked, and the other one is slowly dying. It's an interesting conversation between those two. And it'd be interesting because we have still the amount of time for this episode, and that's because our last question is a big one, and that is how to make a good video game adaptation. Because to me, this is something that I've never seen done, which is taking a video game and pulling off something outside of the video game space with it to this well of a degree. Like, when you think video game movies, you think Resident Evils, and those are all hot garbage. Some bad Halo animes from the mid-2000s. And really just a real hodgepodge of this random junk thrown around. The Tomb Raider movies, maybe? That could be one of them you could think of. But
Wait,
nothing...
Good ones?
Not the good ones. I'm just saying.
Okay.
Just
as bad
video...
things? To be
I don't
honest,
think there's ever
I would like to
been
revisit the Lord of the Rings. God damn it. The Lara Croft movies I haven't seen in forever. They probably do not hold up. But the last one I didn't hate. That's just me. That's what I didn't hate.
It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great.
It wasn't the greatest. No, it was not the greatest. I agree with you.
And that's why I think video games movies are either so bad they're funny, like the Resident Evil films, or it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay, or it's okay. It's never, wow, that was amazing.
I think I have a solution. I think this show solves it.
Tell me what your solution is, Mario. I'm curious.
The solution is you don't adapt games. You adapt around them. So this to me adapt around Lord of the Rings. League of Law. I don't even want to say law.
We
Legends.
don't even have Demacia.
Legends.
Demacia is straight up Lord of the Rings. When we
Yeah.
get to them.
Legends, you don't have to adapt. Legends is a good example because all it is just people talking and yelling at each other of like little lore bits, and you could fill in the gaps there. So lore, like League of Legends, has a leg up in the fact that there is lore, but it's also loose. So you could fill in the gaps
very
there.
loose lore. Yes.
So you can fill in the gaps there. But like, let's just say, like, okay, we're gonna talk about Resident Evil, right?
Yeah.
We just have to stop trying to do the thing over. And I know that we try to do something different with the Resident Evil, the original series, when we started with Alice. And honestly, I think that was a good idea, but I think it needs to still exist in the world of the games without trying to replicate the games. Like, tell a story that exists in that world. Those characters could exist, but at the same time, just like, don't try and replicate them in a way where it's just like, I'm going to do this to beat for beat, because apparently it just does not work whenever we do it. I know that, like, for instance, when we see Uncharted, the trailer looks like it's a combination of different games put together, and immediately is like, yeah, I did that in the game. Like, I don't need to see that visually on screen. Give me something else in that world. Like, it could still follow. The idea when it started was like young Nathan Drake stories. Okay, you had the game that showed him and his brother, and then you showed him in South Africa, I believe. Where's that gap there? Fill that gap.
Yeah.
And that's all you need to do. Don't show me things that are clearly stuff he's going to do in his life later, you know, like that's my idea.
Because Tom Holland looks older than the youngest we've seen Nathan Drake in the video games, but then Mark Wahlberg looks younger than the youngest we've seen Sully. So
I don't
like,
know why they picked him to be
match them
Sully.
together.
Because they had a contract with him of like him being Nathan Drake, and they were just like, you know what? Why don't you just be Sully instead? We're like, that's probably what happened. To be honest.
For me, I think you brought up a really good point, and that is those gaps in that thing. I think what really helped this is at the end, we know Jinx caused massive destruction in Piltover, in near demolishing of that city. Yeah. And we know Vi tried to stop it and was the sister. We knew the endpoints for this. I think filling in parts that we don't know to get to endpoints of characters we know is a really good way to do video game adaptations. Those little moments that we don't see but we kind of know of. So there's enough there to write around, but there's not enough there for us to be like, well, I've already done that in the game. I've already done that. I've seen that. I think those are the moments that would really work for video game adaptations.
Granted, the bad example of that is the prequel series, depending on if you don't do it right. So, I mean, that would just be my only caveat with that. Like, the movie that I like that I think is a good example is actually that Saints of Newark Sopranos spinoff. Only because it fills in gaps. I mean, it didn't have to fill in gaps, but I thought that it did enough.
No, but you learned a lot about his uncle. I think you learned a lot
about his uncle. You learn about all of his father. You learn a lot more of those contexts of scenes that they reshoot again. Like, you learn more in those aspects, and I think that enriches the story that you're trying to tell without changing too much.
And you see, I also thought that about the mini Saints of Newark. I thought that was a fantastic film.
Yeah,
I thought it ended a little weak, but I thought for what it was and what it gave. Yeah. And what it gave me in The Sopranos was fantastic, because it gave me more context to why Tony is Tony.
Yeah, and some interesting revelations that paints a different picture of the original series.
And I think that's also something you can do.
Yeah.
Now, Anthony, what about you? Do you have anything you could add to this? What you thinking about for how to make a good video game adaptation? Because it's such a hard one to pull off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree with the writing around instead of just trying to replicate. As the comic book person, I'm going to put it there because the X-Men are a very long, complicated history, and recently they did a semi-reboot where, as someone who didn't read X-Men, I could jump in, follow along, and that's kind of what you can do with these video games, whether it's Resident Evil that's been around forever, or something new, whatever it is. You got to pick spots that are okay for you to fiddle with, and you can cast a shadow later. So for X-Men, they had a character that you might know from the movies, the girl that Professor Xavier tries to date in like the First Class era.
Oh, Maria Taggart, yeah.
Yeah. So if they pick her and they change her so that as a new person I can come in and follow along, but there's a shadow that gets cast, and if you were reading those books before, you get like, oh my god, they twisted this one thing and it cast a whole different perspective of what I know. And you could do that for these video game adaptations where it doesn't have to follow the exact X-Men Wolverine. It could follow a smaller person or make a new person and see that world from a different perspective and have hints to the big events that everyone knows and those sorts of things. So that's where comic books being so big right now, that's one of the spots that video games can at least look at in terms of, yes, Kevin Feige's going to do Civil War, but it's not going to be Civil War like it is over there because it's just different. You can't do that. And that's where I think it's not publishers because it's movies. The people that once obtained these rights, they shouldn't just try and do it A to B like Resident Evil. They should try to do something different and have homages or hints and those sorts of things as they build these scripts.
Yeah, I think focusing on a character basis, I think, is something that these movies are notoriously weak on. Like you don't necessarily care for them. It's sort of the Remember Berry movies, and as much as I love a good Remember Berry, you're only liking touchstones to something as opposed to the characters themselves. I feel like that's probably the issue that a lot of people have with the Resident Evil movie, because I know that they try to fill in so much within 10 solid minutes of that movie. I have not seen it yet.
Yeah, they do.
I'm debating on seeing it after I see Spider-Man, so we'll see.
It's a film.
I'm sure it's fine. I haven't seen. The guy who brought you 47 meters down below. I'm sure it's fine. I haven't seen that either, but I remember the trailers, and I know I didn't watch it. So who knows? But either way, I just think that there have definitely been some interesting examples, even some that are beautifully flawed. Like I love, even though the Super Mario Brothers movie is not accurate to the goddamn thing, still a fun movie. I'll watch the shit out of it. Mortal Kombat as well.
New Mario movie.
We'll find out. I mean, if it's okay, like there's a spectrum. Is it going to be Minions or is it going to be freaking the Lego movie? You know, I think it's just one or the other.
It really has that large of a spectrum, which is so interesting for that film.
Yeah, well, we'll see how that really works out. I do love Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. I think that's pretty
fun. That was the best pick. That's one better one.
Charlie Day as Luigi is also inspired. I also like that as well. Mortal Kombat, I think, was a fun example in the 90s, and I think it stays in the 90s, but it's a great just first movie, you know? But,
and I think the new Mortal Kombat movie didn't do a half bad job either.
It's not terrible. I just wish that it was about the tournament. I know that it's not about the tournament. It's sort of like a precursor to it. But
yeah, it's pre-tournament, pre-Shao Kahn, all that. But
they added things that I was like unnecessary. You know, like the talisman. I forget what it was. It was like the talisman thing.
Yeah, there's something weird to it.
Yeah,
they made Goro look cool.
No,
which I never thought I'd see on a screen.
Cabal looked amazing.
Yeah, I'm like, these are characters that
what was that?
Odd and strange.
Cabal is a hard one to nail because I think there's a lot of more comic characters that like you can kind of wrap your head around, and Cabal has like a real goofy looking mask. If you do it wrong, it can be cool, and I'm glad they nailed that.
Yeah, in universe too, I understood it. Like I was like, he was clearly with some bad happened to him, and he had to wear that mask, and he's a Bane character, you know, totally cool.
Yeah.
Fuck, even I love Liu Kang. I want a Liu Kang movie so bad. He was so cool.
He was cool.
But I think there is the shell around the movie where it's like, it's like this. Again, we're in a totally different podcast, but I'm just saying there's things there's things that I'm like, you didn't need to do that, but you decided to do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think there would have been so much better if you went back and maybe just focus on one character and lead that journey. But, you know.
I think also a problem that these have is they need to add their own character to the mark of this story. Like with Mortal Kombat, it was the new guy. I can't even remember his name. The lieutenant.
Cole Young, I think.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. I remember that. Or Alice, or all those kinds of things where they add these characters that don't need to be in the story. You could have made just a Scorpion or a Liu Kang movie, and it would have been fucking rad, and it would have worked real well. I think that's a problem for a lot of this, and I think that's something Arcane does perfectly. It did not add anyone that did not need to be a part of this story.
Yeah,
everyone who was there was perfect in this story and played their roles to perfection.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's what elevates it above pretty much any video game media made before it that wasn't a video game. Any TV and movie.
Yeah.
If I could put in why I think it's a great adaptation, apparently Riot was working with the writing staff for this thing for like 4 or 5 years before it ever started getting animated.
Wow, that's incredible.
Like
That's
part of
amazing.
it, like there is some stuff that is sewn into how Vi and Jinx were written as characters at their release that was planned for this adaptation that's like to get fleshed out here.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's a part that could work is communicating with the people that were originally involved with the process. Not to say, what do you want us to do, but to say, what was your intent and how do you envision these characters outside of how they are in the product? And because, like, sometimes there are things that are, like, in a creator's head that they don't write down, but they're like, this is how I'm coming at this. And maybe the audience doesn't need to know, but maybe the person who's taking that and making a show or a movie out of it would like to know. I think another thing is that I think some of these things like Tomb Raider or Uncharted or to a lesser extent Assassin's Creed are just licenses that are so close to other movies that exist that they're like, okay, let's make a Indiana Jones. Well, we can make a video game movie out of Tomb Raider. That's like Indiana Jones. We can make an Uncharted movie. That's like Indiana Jones. And then they're trying to be something they're not while trying to appeal to the fans by having just lip service references to the IP. And for what you can say about Arcane, it is rooted in the League of Legends universe. And
Yeah.
these characters, they feel like how they part of it is also that League of Legends is basically like a glorified chess game. It is people on a board like just mashing against each other, so you have an extra freedom to expand on those characters, but it also feels like a unique universe that doesn't feel like a ripoff of anything. I think part of it is that everyone is kind of a ripoff of something, but at some point it just all starts to feel like its own thing with how they're put together. I think that's why I like Heimerdinger so much in this show, is because he's from a race called Yordles, which are, depending on how League is feeling, either elf and or furry badger short people.
Sure.
And Heimerdinger is like the perfect in the middle line graph between the ones that look kind of like mini elves and the ones that look kind of like animal furry people.
Mustache wielding people.
Because some of them like have badger faces, and then others they just like have pointy ears and look like an elf, and it's weird. But I like that. I feel like part of it is picking a video game that when you turn it into a good adaptation, it doesn't make you look like someone saying, "Oh, that's like an Indiana Jones movie." It's like, no, Arcane is a League of Legends thing. It's its own thing, and it feels interesting. There's like bits and pieces of like sci-fi and steampunk and like punk rock music in there, but it all meshes together to feel unique, and I think that's
A very unique world.
yeah.
I would love for Overwatch to get this treatment because I think that's another game that
This is-
absolutely has the lore laid in there that could be filled in with the gaps of the show like
Yep.
this.
Yep.
I understand. You also mentioned Assassin's Creed. I might want to revisit that because that's the example that I was saying, which is it's in the universe, but it's not about any of the characters or anything like that.
Okay.
So I might, if I think of it, because I watched it, I was like, I don't like this because it's not the thing I
Yeah.
want. But I wonder if I watch it now, because I've been doing that a lot. That's the whole point of MCU University, is that what if I go back and revisit these things and look at them at a more natural lens of like,
Mhm.
what were they trying to tell? What were they trying to do? And if it was a good movie, so I'm very curious to go back on that one.
I will be honest, I completely forgot it had a movie till John said it, and it hit me that I saw that in a
Yeah.
theater.
Yep, I saw it in the
Yeah.
theater too.
Oh wait, no, that was Fassbender. I got him confused with the guy that plays Geralt.
I remember
thought
it
it was
having
good.
I remember it having a cool trailer. But
Mhm.
I'm gonna say one last thing on this, and then we can get the plugs. And that is, I think what this did really well, and especially is that it had bright, unique, amazing characters, but and a little bit of lore that we know about the world. That we knew that Yon was full of gangsters and villains, and that's just kind of what it's always been. It is the underground. It's that kind of story. And then Piltover is a city of gold in glimmer and technology. And we kind of knew that from League lore, but not really to the extent other than skins based around the places and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gave them such freedom to burst down those doors and just burst through those doors and show me these amazing worlds and drop me into these amazing places. And it all felt lived in and it felt well crafted and thought out to perfection to get two characters that needed to get to this point for story to where they are in League of Legends. And I think that's what makes it special is it ability to craft an amazing world with very little it had and to also though take characters that do have extensive lore and know how we get to the location and do that perfectly. So an unknown world with two very well-known characters. That's a hard one to do. And I think it did it perfectly. And for me, that's why Arcane is an amazing show. And for some reason, if you've just been spoiled by the entirety of Arcane and sat for this entire podcast, go watch it. It's real good. And with that,
even if you got spoiled, it's worth watching for sure.
Yeah. And for that, we're going to get to plugs. Anthony, what are you plugging today?
Well, today, everyone knows workforces are struggling to find people. I'm in one of those positions. I am now the one person when we had, I think, 4 people to do, especially my job. So I am not having as much time to make content, but I'm making television, which is what I'm doing now. And so
Cool.
I get to be on TV, which is a weird thing I never wanted to do. But Hometown Living has a
interesting
holiday little special where we, as a team, come together, cook some food that you could make with the holidays. And so if you want to see me on the internet on like actual TV, which is so odd. I didn't want to do it, but they made me. But that's where we're at. So you won't find me on the internet. You'll find me on TV occasionally. Hopefully not as much as they're going to make me, but we'll see.
Alrighty. That was not a turn I was expecting, but an interesting one to say the least, Anthony. John, where can people find you and what are you plugging?
You can find me on my Twitter at Noisy Shark. Lately, I just finished Resident Evil 4, so I'm probably going to be posting about my thoughts on that. And then I started Bloodborne because the trailer for Elden Ring got me so excited that I was like, I'm going to give Bloodborne a shot. And I've been enjoying it more this time than the last 2 or 3 times I tried to play it. So I might make something about that soon.
Mario, what are you plugging today?
Even though it says at that Mario Rivera down here, I'm actually at Nightmute City, so go ahead there. You can also find me at nightmutecity.com, which is my website where you can actually see all my work. I created a portfolio website for jobs. Give me jobs. I don't know. I think I'm going to go ahead.
Man, people.
I do also Marvel show over there at the old Point in Progress called MC University, which I'm having a lot of fun with Sly, and we are going through the old universe, as everyone knows. The originally starting with Blade, going through all the way up to Venom 2, or Mobius, I guess will technically be the next one after that one. So we're making our trek through. We just did Daredevil. Next week's X2. And I already watched the next 2 movies. Oh boy, oh, this is either the greatest thing we ever done or the biggest mistake, and I can't wait to talk about that. So, yeah, for sure. And also read Hideo Kojima's book, The Creative Genes. Also fantastic.
You know what? I bought it, but I haven't read it yet, so I'll definitely sit down and do that. Also, do you want to give you a shout? Your Daredevil episode, fantastic. That was some good shit, man. I forgot about that movie entirely.
No, 100%. And that's what I love is that we get to go back, revisit it, see if they hold up. Some do, some don't. That one, watch Colin Farrell. Just watch Colin Farrell.
I'll just be plugging my Twitter like usual, Ryan the Lion 3055, where you can find me for whatever I'm up to on the internet, wherever I'll be showing up. And also my show Anime Nation. We got some fun stuff coming up with that. And yeah, everybody, thank you for watching. Have a great night.